2019, I had an interview with Kathy Alexander on her experiences at Bury Pomeroy Castle in Devon. She used to work for English Heritage. So you're here to talk about Bury Pomeroy Castle, aren't you?
Yeah, so I used to work for English Heritage, and between 2006 and 2009, and for a couple of years we ran ghost tours at the castle in the summer. I've also run lots of educational visits there, and we also used to do occasionally paranormal investigations there as well, which paranormal groups would run, but we'd be there in attendance while they were there.
Have you had any experiences whilst being at the castle?
I've had a few, yes, and quite a lot through other people. So while I've had visitors there, they've been experiencing something while I was standing by, if you like. For instance, when I was conducting one of the ghost tours, we were explaining that in this particular space in the castle, people quite often felt like little stones were being thrown at them, or there was sort of like naughty things going on. And while I was explaining it, someone got hit on the forehead with a piece of gravel, and we were looking at everyone and no one had thrown anything. So and it was a dad, and his son was there, and he was accusing his son, but his son was standing behind him, so it couldn't possibly have hit him on the forehead. Other people have had very common that their cameras will fail, and some people come with really fancy, digital cameras that all bells and whistles, and they'll be fine and fully working and batteries charged. They get into the castle and nothing, can't take a picture, nothing will work. One night, a whole group of people, we were on the lawn at the end of the tour, it was twilight, and looking through those amazing Tudor layers, when you look through the ruin, you're looking through doors and windows and doors.
Oh, yeah.
And right against the sort of far wall, through all these doors and windows, we could see a tiny spot of light. And it was just like almost like you were looking at a star, like a little bright light shining. But everybody was taking pictures of it, but nobody could work out what it was because the castle on that side was in complete darkness.
Many, many moons ago, in the country of England, William the Conqueror gave Ralph de Pomeroy, a Norman knight from the Pomeroy near Falaise, a piece of land in the county of Devonshire, on which now stands Bury Pomeroy Castle. It was built by the Pomeroy family in the 15th century. At that time, led interesting and colourful lives. Back then, the county of Devonshire was in a very disturbed state and was the most lawless area of southern England. In the tree.
One day I was in the castle when we were planning the ghost tours out, and I was wandering about with my colleague, and we were talking about what we were going to do at point A and point B. And this lady came up to talk to us. She was a New Zealander, just visiting the castle. Her name was Pomeroy, and she was a descendant of the Pomeroys. And she told me this was her third visit to the castle. She'd been backwards and forwards to the UK several times on holiday and had found out that her ancestry was from the South Devon Pomeroys. And she wanted to talk to me about her experiences. One of her work colleagues had come to her and said, "Oh, I was dreaming about you last night." And the lady said to her, "Okay, what did you dream?" And she said, "Well, I dreamt that you were driving down through woods with your husband, and I was standing on top of the castle, and I was waving to you to come to the castle." And so, of course, the lady was really surprised by this, because it wasn't like she was a friend that she'd ever told about Berry Pomeroy or anything. So she said to her, "Do you know I'm going to the UK in a couple of weeks' time?" And the lady who'd had the dream said, "No, I didn't know anything about it." The lady got onto the internet and she tried to get a photo of Berry Pomeroy up on her computer to show the lady who'd had the dream, and she could not get a photo to come up for love nor money. It took her 3 days, and finally she got a photo up of the castle, and she showed it to her work colleague and said, looking at the gatehouse, at the front of the castle, she said, "Is this something like your dream?" And the lady said, "Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like." The other staff, there were maybe 5 of us involved in running the ghost tours, and one of the younger members of staff used to do the dressing up bits and appear at appropriate moments and waft across the lawn, dressed in all her grey finery and so on, looking suitably ghostly. And one day, it was the very last ghost tour we did actually, she was running really late, and she arrived, and she'd got stuck in traffic coming over from Paynton where she lived, and she was in a really bad mood because of that, and we were ready to pull her out of her clothes and pull her dress on and slap the white makeup on her face. So we were really rushing because the customers were at the gate, and she was moaning furiously as we were pulling off her clothes about the traffic. And then she said, "And I wish every time I came to this castle and did this tour, I didn't end up with stomach cramps." And my manager and I both looked at her and went, "Oh, you too?" And then we both looked at each other and went, "Oh, you too." So it turned out that all 3 of us, every time we did the ghost tour, we were getting stomach cramps. And it was always when we were near the tower that the White Lady is supposed to come from, the Margaret Tower. And the story about that tower is about 2 sisters and one sister locking the other up. And I've never really bought that. It's a very common folklore myth that you can find everywhere from the north of Scotland to the south of Devon. But St. Margaret was the patron saint of childbirth. And a lot of the paranormal investigators who came there, they bring psychics with them, and the psychics have said that they feel pain or they feel loss when they're there, and that it's to do with childbirth. And we wonder if the upper stories of that tower might have been used as the birthing rooms for the ladies of the castle, and so therefore you would associate cramping and pain and loss with that.
Sometime later, Edward Seymour, who was the first Duke of Somerset and Lord Protector to Edward VI, bought it, and then in 1552 was executed for treason. Ouch. After which the land was taken by the Crown. Edward's eldest son, also Edward, had to buy it back through an intermediary, Sir John Tyne of Longleat, in a surreptitious manner. Loads of sword fighting there then. After which, he made it his home and commenced work on the Tudor mansion within its walls, which was unfortunately never finished. It felt really high energy, as though there was it was quite lively, the audience were quite lively, and there was a, sort of, you felt like things were going on. And we were standing in the kitchens, the old kitchens, which are right next to the Margaret Tower, just through a little archway and down. And there is a massive chimney there that you can stand in and look straight up to the sky. And all around, there's a lot of places in the castle where there's a lot of old graffiti, and this is one of them. Down the side of the fireplace, you find graffiti. And I was pointing out the graffiti with them to them with a torch, and I was saying, "Oh, just have a look at the graffiti here. Some of it is modern, some of it is very old, and you can tell by the difference in the actual script that they use when they, write whatever they're writing." And I said, "This one is particularly interesting," and I shone a torch where it said hell, and it was written in quite an old script. And the 12-year-old boy with his parents went, "Oh, look, I wrote that on my hand today." And he held his hand out, and he'd written hell with a pen on his hand in exactly the same script, the same sort of writing as what was on the wall inscribed. He thought it was hilarious. His parents nearly passed out. They went deathly white and they were horrified, and he thought it was really funny. The paranormal investigators seem to pick up on this presence a lot, and it is a classic story. It's been written about in ghost books that were written about Barry Pomeroy in the 70s and 80s. It's the story of the Grinning Guard, and it relates the story of this couple who come to Barry Pomeroy one evening to walk their dogs, and it was before there was an entry, before English Heritage reopened it. So the couple entered up the small steps that are next to the gatehouse, and when they got onto the rampart, they could see a light shining above them. Now, there is no second level on the rampart. Obviously, they were just looking up at the walls. But if you look up above the gatehouse, there is an old filled-in door. And it is where the guards used to come from the higher ramparts on the other side of the gatehouse. And they saw this light and what looked like the figure of a man in some kind of armor or uniform, staring down at them and holding a lantern of sorts. And the way they recounted it, 1 minute he was at the top of the steps, and just in a split second he suddenly was right in front of them and shining the light in their faces, and the dog just
tail between the legs and bolted down the steps and ran out of the castle. And they followed immediately afterwards because they were so scared. That's the only account I've ever heard in going back to sort of those times when all those books were written about that figure. However, every time I've ever been there with an paranormal investigation group, they have always picked up this presence of someone along the ramparts who feels like he's in authority or in charge, not necessarily resentful of the fact that there are people there, but wants to check everybody out and make sure everyone's behaving themselves and in order. That kind of feeling that he's protective of his castle. And one psychic in particular picked him up to the point that she could feel he was I mean, obviously, I'm not clairvoyant, so I couldn't see this, but she said she could see him and that he was checking out one of the younger women that was in the group, kept standing in front of her and looking her up and down.
Due to its checkered past, Bury Pomeroy Castle was abandoned in the late 17th century and was left to decay. It then became a most romantic ruin.
The other thing I've noticed about the castle too is that a lot of dowsers used to go there, and they always talked about there being ley lines under the castle, that it was a crossing point or a strong point for ley lines.
Yeah, someone else told me that.
Yeah. No, it's up to people to decide whether they believe in ley lines. They do say that under Bury Pomeroy it's a very strong crossing point of ley lines, and maybe all that energy has something to do with it. And all those stones, maybe those stones are storing information.
I'm sure they are.
There's a lot of granite there, after all.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for that.
That's okay.
That was amazing. Amazing. Many tales and legends developed, and Bury Pomeroy became known by some as the most haunted castle in England.